safe streets, vibrant neighborhoods, successful business and commerce. These are things that make a healthy community. We are a diverse community, rural, suburban, urban, a multitude of languages and ethnicities, ages and experiences. We are a collaborative community. Public-private partnerships make us a model community that others want to follow. It is what makes us unique. It is what makes us strong. The employees of Kent County reflect our diversity and seek to serve our communities.
People in this county, in this area, we wrap our arms around each other. We come together to collaborate, to solve problems. We're all working for the good of the whole. And I think that's wonderful. And you can see it. You can see it as you drive around Kent County.
Our impact starts the day a baby is born and a birth certificate is issued, to protecting children from deadly diseases through vaccination, to the public safety and justice provided by law enforcement and the courts, to offering veteran services and caring for the elderly. Every day we work to keep our communities robust.
I think if you are somebody who's interested in serving your community, in building a strong knowledge base and a good group of people to work with, then the county is one of your best employment opportunities out there. It's been completely rewarding in every way I could possibly explain for 26 years, and I feel like I grow every single day still today.
Leading these dedicated employees, our 19-member Board of Commissioners and our County Administrator Controller, along with our elected officials and appointed department directors, placing emphasis on civic involvement, quality housing, vibrant neighborhoods, and strong, solid infrastructure to allow businesses to thrive. Professional, dedicated, collaborative, and innovative.
Behind the scenes, collaboration between foundations, charitable organizations, nonprofits, for-profit businesses, public sector demonstrated through the county, the city of Grand Rapids, the townships, all the cities and the villages in our area. If we don't come together, then we will not have the strength that we have today, and I only hope to build upon that.
Our aim is to make our communities the best they can be. We are involved in exciting development projects, sustainable recycling programs, and creative progressive prevention programming. We partner with elected officials, impacting policy ideas that become great achievements. We seek opportunities to reach out into the community and offer our services to help our residents make Kent County thrive.
Our relationship is solid, both from a staff standpoint at the county level as well as the Board of Commissioners. And they understand what we do and the benefits that we can do for the community, and vice versa. We couldn't do what we do without the help of Kent County.
While most of us are busy running our lives, Kent County's elected officials, administrator controller, and over 1,600 employees are serving the communities where we live our lives, so we can all have a place we are proud to call home. Kent County, its life well run.
It's about 8:30 or 8:31. This is the meeting of the Legislative and Human Resources Committee of the Kent County Board of Commissioners. Welcome. We will start on our agenda. We will sort of start on our agenda as soon as Natasha sits down. Sorry about that. I should have looked first. All right, we'll start with public comment. If anyone wishes to address the committee, you may do so. Identify yourself, and you have up to 3 minutes on any items pertaining to our agenda. If there is no one, we'll move to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes of the January 28, 2020 meeting. So moved. It is moved for approval. Is there a support? Support. There is support. Any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is approved. Next item is Performance Management Review Team Update from Mary Beth Ventil. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank
Good.
you. Today's going to be an update on the Performance Management Review Team. In 1997, we started this journey down performance management. And in 97, it was about counting things. In 2008, the Board of Commissioners adopted a policy, an administrative policy on performance measurement and results, which was requiring departments to do their performance measures, and report out then to this committee. And that was a big step in 2008 to actually be that forward thinking with our performance management process. Fast forward to now, we are really moving into a year of transition that is going to take us to what I'd like to call Performance 3.0. We've had 2 iterations and now we're on our 3rd. As we look at performance management, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about culture as well. There's one thing if we want to just count things, report out measures. It's another step to really look at this holistically as a culture of performance excellence. In 2015, Wayman gave a presentation at our leadership summit that talked about developing this mindset, this culture around performance excellence, and how really at the top it starts with our county strategic plan and then it permeates throughout everything else that we do. So it's not just about what our departments are looking at and counting, but we've also linked it to our performance evaluation for our MPP employees as well, so that they're looking at what they're doing, how that aligns to their department goals, and then how those department goals align to our strategic plan. This new system, in a day now where we as consumers want more access to information, ready access to information, it really pushes us to a new level of transparency with our performance. And so what we're looking for with this particular iteration is something that is integrated across departments and across all of employees. One that has a holistic approach that looks at all of the things that we are doing, not just the things that we can count, which I think is what previous iterations we really focused on. What are those measurables that we can count? And we want to take that to the next level now. We want to be able to tell our story. So with the numbers that we're counting, with the work that we're doing, what is the story that we're telling our public? What is the story that we're telling to you, our commissioners? And what are we telling each other as employees so that we know what exactly we're doing here at Kent County? With that, you'll see some heightened data visualization. That's a way of looking at the numbers so that you can see trends over time. So you're not just looking at a spreadsheet, at a chart with numbers that quite honestly might not mean anything to you when you're looking at them, but with the help of the visualization, you can actually see, okay, this is a trend that's going up or going down or maintaining, what we need for our status quo. And then it also brings us to a heightened level of accountability with our consumers and with each other. So as we move through this transition, over the past year, we purchased a new piece of software called Invisio, which is transitioning us from our old performance management database to a new platform that allows us for this greater transparency with our consumers and amongst ourselves. In October, we had a workshop with our directors where we really pushed them to reevaluate what they had been measuring historically and look at new items that they can capture, project work that they can capture in a way that we haven't before. With that, we are also working one-on-one with departments to look at this new way of doing things and assist departments on how to tell their own story and drive their narrative. Probably the biggest deliverable that this new platform allows is a public dashboard. And this is a dashboard that will reside out on Access Kent, and it will allow us to communicate the progress that we're making specifically on the strategic plan. We can communicate that progress to our constituents. We can communicate that to each other. We can celebrate our work, and we can educate the public on what the county does. I think for our residents, it's a gray area where the work of the county begins and another entity stops, and they're not always aware on what does county government do. So this will help with that storytelling. This dashboard, as you can see laid out, highlights the 5 different priority areas that you as a board established with the new strategic plan. You'll notice that there's a status bar. It shows up as green and blue below each one of those priority areas. And that'll show us if we're on track, if we've completed work, and there will be a legend that kind of guides what the different colors mean. If you want to go into, say, high quality of life, and you click on that particular link, it lets you dive down a layer deeper, and it looks at the 5 different goals that you have established underneath high quality of life. Again, you'll notice status bars that reflect all of the measurements that roll up into those different items. It gives an aggregate status with that. If I want to look at, but what are we really doing under one of these specific goal areas, I can click on it. And then I can see these are the items that we are measuring that roll up specifically underneath this priority and goal. I don't expect you to be able to read what's on the screen. This is just more of a visual so that you can see what will be available out on the website when we go live with this. This will be an aggregate of both the things that we are measuring as well as the project work that we are doing that roll up under this particular goal and priority. I can click yet one layer deeper if I want to look at the measurements, and this is going to get really small on your screen, but you can see then that data visualization that shows you how we're progressing on the different items that we're measuring. And so it really gives that, that granular level of accountability on the work that we're doing. And you can see trend over time on if we're improving and how our work is being shaped by that. As far as what comes next, well, I can check off the first two items. We've had our department directors meetings where we've rolled this out. I'm doing the PMRT presentation at this moment. What comes next is working one-on-one with departments to help them reestablish their goals, their objectives, and their measures. We look to launch the public dashboard at the State of the County address. And then this really becomes an ongoing process. This isn't a one and done. Now we've got it up on the website. We can be done. This becomes ongoing work with our department so that we are continually fine-tuning our measures and leveraging that so that we can tell our story better to our community.
Questions? Oh, very interesting. Good. Questions from anyone? Yes, Commissioner Feinstein.
Thank you, Chair Stack. Not really a question.
Can you put your mic on, Stan? Thank you.
Very impressed with the layout and the way it looks. It looks like it's going to be easy to navigate and a little bit different than things that we've seen before, so thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Cool stuff. Thanks. Thanks for the overview. I'm really looking forward to the rollout. Not having seen the rollout, I guess I want to ask if you could talk a little bit about whether we'll see community outcomes. So, for example, under high quality of life, I assume there's some sort of community outcome and some indicators of what is the level of the quality of life out in the community in Kent County. Is that an area that you move toward, or are we not there yet?
That's part of that ongoing work. So I know the health department is simultaneously working on some indicators around how do we assess our overall, quality of life in our community. And so some of that will work hand in hand. But we don't have, these defined 5 areas that we're saying this is what equals high quality of life. But what it does do is it shows here's the initiatives that we're looking at, or like lead will show up in that, PFAS, some of those different issues that we are working on so that we can achieve that high quality of life.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Melton.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to add to Commissioner Feinstein, the way that you have presented this is so nice, but especially for me, and I'm hoping I'm not the only one left in Kent County who has a little trouble sometimes navigating charts and whatever. You have given me or the consumer an opportunity to stop here, or if we'd like to learn more, go on, but you've explained each thing very, very well. And this will be something that people will look at instead of just saying, oh, well, I don't understand that, and go on. I mean, this is very, very well done. Thank you.
Commissioner Talon, you had a second?
Thank you. Second shot. As I'm listening to that, it occurred to me to ask, what's been the reception of departments at the county of this? Because going back a ways, it's been a struggle sometimes,
Yeah.
particularly departments that aren't accountable to the county administration, but that we want to collaborate with and whose collaboration is critical to moving some of these
Yeah.
measures. How has that been going?
I really think this helps us shift so that performance management doesn't feel like it's punitive, but really is an opportunity to say, here is the great work that we're doing. And I think with that shift, departments will be able to get on board and say, oh, you know what, we're doing this great initiative, and they'll want to really push that reporting out.
Yeah, can I add to that, Jim?
They're not involved in it that much yet? That's still happening?
They are,
Okay.
yeah. So in that department directors workshop that we had, we had the directors go through an exercise where they would look at their measures, and they did the alignment with, here's how it links to the strategic plan. Now that we have all of that data, we're going through and identifying, okay, what are the other initiatives that we might not have captured before that we can spotlight? So some of that project work that we're doing.
I would just add to that, the receptivity has been outstanding. We had a session with the Sheriff's Department at their offices with Invisio to go through the process, and they've shared their strategic plan as of this past week, and it, of course, will be linked with the system. So they're very excited about the ability to post things, to share things, to do exactly what Mary Beth is talking about. The other departments also, I've not heard one complaint from anyone yet.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Hennessy.
Thank you. I can see where this will really be really great as our dashboard on our Access Kent site. But how will it change what we hear during these performance reviews? Well, how will the information be presented to us, and how will that change?
I think you'll have a report that in your hands that is easier to read. I know even before, when I was looking at the previous reports, while it was great to see, that we were averaging 98%, 97%, over time, I would look at some of those and go, I don't know if this is a good number or a bad number. And I think being able to make that visual and looking at it through charts, you'll be able to get that feel for, this is a positive trend, or if that helps at all.
You think it'll be a more personal type of approach this way, rather than all data-driven type of
I think it'll be more
information that we've been
holistic.
given?
I think we'll get that data-driven, and we'll be able to make meaning of those numbers a little bit easier. But then we'll also have a narrative portion where we can really highlight some of the other projects and initiatives that we have going. So it'll be more encompassing of all the work that a department does when they report out to you.
Anyone else? If not, thank you, Mary Beth.
Thanks.
We'll look forward to seeing this roll out. Good. All right, next item of business, Public Affairs Associates. Becky Beckler is here to enlighten us on the latest, greatest from Lansing.
Now
Good
that
morning.
Governor Whitmer's budget is in the hands of the legislature, they are fully engulfed in the process of subcommittee activity on each issue area. Both House and Senate subcommittees already have a robust schedule at hand for the next several weeks, understanding and unpacking the governor's budget. Not only that, they'll also have meetings of which key stakeholders and issue experts are able to provide insight as they continue to unpack the governor's budget. Her budget this year was more of a traditional budget. If you recall, last year it was a very complicated budget that was presented to the legislature. It had some significant tax increase proposals, both on business as well as a large 45-cent gas tax proposal that the legislature really did push back on. This year's budget is much more in line with, I think, previous budgets that they've seen. There aren't a significant number of new programs. There are some new programs. There aren't a significant number of fee increases. I think there's only one. But it's a much more traditional budget, and something that as you looked at the responses from the Senate and House Republicans as well as Democrats, they felt it was a budget that they could work with, and they felt pretty good about it. There was a little pushback on the governor's proposal for bonding if it comes to roads. If you remember, in her State of the State, she decided to bypass the legislative process and go out and purchase $3.5 billion in bonds for state roads. The State Transportation Commission did that the day after she delivered her budget to the legislature. I think that was on Friday, February 7th. So that is fully implemented, does not need any legislative approval, so that is moving forward. In response, though, the Senate Majority Leader has noted that because that money is only dedicated to state roads, he is looking at proposals that would allow for some additional funding for local roads. He doesn't have any detail. He's actually asked his caucus to have an internal work group on that, but is something that he is open to and sees as an enhancement to what the governor has proposed with regards to addressing our roads crisis. There are some key components of the governor's proposal that I'd like to just share with you. Clearly, as it comes to education, the governor has once again proposed increases. For the per pupil funding allowance, it's about a 2.8 increase, which makes the new base per student about $1,100 per student. For community colleges and higher education, it's a 2.5% increase, which is just a little bit below inflation, I think, if you look at that. Just a couple new proposals, as she outlined in her State of the State, a program for new moms going from 60-day coverage on Medicaid to an entire year, and then a new program to expand preschool for low-income students as well as some of her new programs. She has put in $15 million for Pure Michigan. That is a significant decrease from what other governors and well as she has proposed before. There is a change in direction when it comes to Pure Michigan. I think the legislature as well as the governor would like to look at different ways to get a revenue to them versus the restricted funds. So it's a significant drop. If you'll recall, though, this was one of the items that was vetoed in the last year's budget, and it has not yet been fully restored. So looking at that $15 million, that could be an area where the legislature is going to need to do a little bit more work. She has also recommended a My Reconnect program, which is something that she initiated in last year's State of the State message, which has allowed individuals that are 25 years or older to return back to the community college network for some additional skilled trades education, hoping that additional skilled trades will enhance, either get them a promotion or a new job with additional wages. So that's a $35 million proposal. It does require legislative approval, and it's something that both the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, seem to be embracing, and they feel like that's a program that probably will happen. They're also going to seek that in the supplemental, if we do have a supplemental, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Specific to counties, though, we are looking at several programs that the governor has proposed. When it comes to statute of revenue sharing, she has proposed a 2.5% increase. That's about $232 million. She's also proposed $7 million to support recommendations for a joint county-state jail and pretrial incarceration task force. $40 million in grants to areas throughout the state that have experienced flooding and infrastructure issues when it comes to high water. Funding for county veterans is a decrease from $4 million last year to $2 million this year. And for secondary road patrol, she's recommending $11 million. That's down from $13 million in her previous budget. Reimbursement for county jails for housing state prisoners, that's at a flat rate, so there's no increase in that reimbursement. And as far as our local public health services, their essential services, also no increases recommended. However, I do want to note that the legislature, and specifically Senator Pete McGregor, has been instrumental in increases to local public health for the last 2 years. Some of the budget problems are like the perfect storm, as the budget director described when he was announcing the budget, in that of the $11 billion in general fund that's purely dedicated to either public safety, health and human services, or higher ed, this year about $2 billion has to go to other forms not within that. And if you look back at what previous legislatures have done as far as reacting to different proposals, it's now coming back and affecting this budget. In 2015, the legislature passed a roads project, which now requires, in this year's budget, $600 million dedicated to road funding. That's something that had previously had been solely dedicated to the fuel tax and fees, user fees, which I think were in our car rentals and things like that. That's now going to come back to us. There's another $500 million in business tax credit. Those are the mega tax credits that were given to businesses that either enhance their employees or retain jobs throughout the state of Michigan. There are a couple tax breaks that we're now responsible for, about $500 million to reimburse local governments when the state decided they wanted to reduce the personal property tax to businesses, and $200 million in the homestead property tax. That was also part of the 2015 road tax agreement. There's some baseline cost increases also that we're looking at. $240 million in Medicaid and other caseloads. In last two previous budgets, those caseloads have actually decreased, and now we're seeing an uptick, which costs a little bit more money on the state budget. There's another $100 million that's tied to state employees' compensated related costs because our retirees are living longer, so that's costing the state a little bit more money. And then there's some federal policy changes, specifically when it comes to Medicaid reimbursement, that's costing the state about $50 million that they did not anticipate. So that's something that we still need to watch. So that's kind of created this storm where we don't have, even though as I described in January, we have additional revenue, the cost implications of the items that I just listed are really putting some pressures on this budget. As I indicated, I think you'll probably see in the next coming weeks some proposal from Senator Mike Shirkey, who's the Senate Majority Leader, when it comes to local road funding. So he has indicated that new money's not out of the question. I think he wants to go back to a proposal that he had given to the governor a year ago, which is bonding for the state teacher retirement pension. It's something that the governor's not really interested in. I think he has a new angle that he wants to share with her. He's also mentioned that perhaps adding a penny to the sales tax is not out of the question. I doubt you would see any of that before the November election. The House is up for election, all 110 seats. So that could be a complicating factor of any type of new road funding. We have some good news in that legislation was introduced, House Bill 5488. We need to deal with the sunset extension as it refers to court costs. And that's something that will expire in October of 2020 if we don't extend that. That's the Cunningham decision on court costs. So we do have that legislation that we need to move through before they adjourn in July. This week is going to be key in the House of Representatives. Last December, I think I shared with you that the Regional Transportation Act, or the Municipal Partnership Act, as it's also referred, is something that Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw is seeking to put on the ballot this November. The House Speaker realizes that probably this is the last week in which he can attempt to move that through the House of Representatives. It's our understanding he's about 4 or 5 votes short. However, this is the week when he plans to try to move that off the House floor. There are probably going to be some significant amendments offered, whether it might be specific to actually Macomb County. They might need to remove Macomb County from this joint partnership and allow them to opt in at a later time where they're having trouble getting votes out of Macomb County. If you recall, when this last was on the ballot, Macomb County rejected it pretty clearly. Oakland County rejected it slightly, but that's when Brooks Patterson was not supportive. Oakland County is now fully engaged. But you'll see the legislature try to move that this week. If they don't move it this week, they will move off it and not come back to it for the remainder of the year because they need time to get it on the ballot, which moves any conversation of a supplemental out another week as well. The Speaker of the House had earlier this year decided that he wanted to move a supplemental in February. He really wanted to push that with the main goal of restoring all of those budget cuts that the governor had vetoed as a result of the budget negotiation. So if you take off the ones that we restored back in December, those remaining items he would like to see restored. So that proposal is probably going to move to next week, where the House will try to move a supplemental. They're still working through an agreement with the governor's office as well as the Senate, but you'll probably see some activity on a supplemental next week, and I'll share that with you as soon as we get a copy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Becky. That was a lot.
That was a lot.
Great. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. Had some good news on the way in this morning. I see where Michigan's back in the top 25, so that's good news.
That is very good
That's
news.
very good news. So on the road funding, I've got about 3 real brief things. What are the length of the bonds that they're looking at when it comes to selling these? Have they come to that decision yet?
I believe they have, but let me get you that information in more detail about what you're referring to, specifically what the state transportation.
Right, the
Okay.
bonding, yeah.
Let me find out for you to get the
Okay,
right-
yeah, and it's no hurry, because even though they've approved it, they haven't been sold yet, and that's at least 2-3 months down the road.
Let me get that timeline for you.
Okay, so I think at the last meeting, I talked about the recycling proposal and how the money's divided up on the bottle bill. I'd asked the question to someone else about, there's a lot of recycling centers that are taking these in with no reimbursement at all. And I was told the tough part about that is that being at a ballot proposal that got this law through, it takes 2/3 of the legislature. So is that true then for the other, how they're trying to mix it up too? Change the percentages of what's already in there?
You know, that's a good question. Let me see if it does require a 2/3. My sense is that perhaps it does, but I want to make sure that I have the right information to you.
Okay, because 2/3, I think, in this climate is, impossible, so.
It certainly does propose some significant challenges.
So on the 4-year terms for county commissioners, I think Mac has said strongly that we don't care if it's in the governor year or the presidential years. But that seems to be a sticking point, and this is the closest we've ever come. Is this issue pretty much dead on just that one issue of when we're going to seek these elections?
Well, it certainly is. It moved to the House Ways and Means Committee because it moved out of its original committee pretty quickly. However, we are running into somewhat of a roadblock. I wouldn't exactly say it's dead. I think there could be some negotiations. There actually could, what's referred to as horse trading. There are some individuals that want some other issues resolved. So I think it's probably a lame duck issue, but I wouldn't take it off the table completely. I think that there's still some life there. But you're exactly right. That is that is a problem between which year that moves to.
Okay. And then finally, I had an opportunity to be at the local chamber legislative breakfast, and we had 12 reps and senators there, which I thought was a pretty good turnout. And a lot of criticism from the audience about things just not getting done. And they all said, oh no, we work with each other, bipartisan. But the thing that struck me of all the topics they covered, mental health wasn't even on anyone's radar. I mean, what's it gonna take? A couple CMHs declaring bankruptcy and this thrown on the state for them to really take this as a serious matter. And I know with term limits, there's not a lot of institutional knowledge on the issue of mental health services. But just a county over in Muskegon, we had a medical facility shut down that dealt with behavioral health, so.
So I think, to sort of answer your question, I think you're seeing the crisis is building, and you're seeing it within the Department of Health and Human Services. I think Director Gordon sees it as a crisis. I know he has put forth his proposal as far as how he wants to handle mental health. It's getting a significant pushback, specifically from the Senate Majority Leader, who also cares about mental health, but the challenge is how to best implement it. But if you look at what's going on with our CMHs around the state, they're in a crisis because they're underfunded. And that, from a specific point, I think if you look at our West Michigan delegation, they are very much aware of the crisis. If you look at Oakland County, they are aware of it, as well as the Detroit area. But getting it as a legislative priority where everybody's thinking about it is the challenge, because there are so many other issues and how you handle it, and they're very specific. So that is the challenge. But it's quickly becoming a crisis because so many areas of our state are having some funding crises, and programs are being forced to close down or soon to close down. That it's coming, you can feel it hitting a boiling point. So we're not that far away when they're going to have to deal with it, unfortunately, at a time when we're at crisis versus when we can.
I saw my blue light went off, so I figured stand cut me off.
I didn't know I had a blue light. Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. First, a question, I guess. Becky, I heard yesterday also information about the veterans grants being cut, and the explanation that I heard, and I guess I wanted to get your take on it as well, is that a fair amount of the dollars that have been allocated, these are the $50,000 grants that go to each county for, emergency food and those kinds of things, that a lot of counties aren't using them, and so the dollars haven't been used, and so the legislature said, why are we funding it at this level? Is that your understanding as well of that?
Yes, and there are a couple other programs that are in similar situations where if the budget office sees that the money appropriated from the previous year hasn't been fully engaged, then they push that back. I think you will see there's a veteran, his name is Representative Jason Wentworth, who watches this line closely. I think he feels this is one of his personal missions. I think he'll have something to say about this line and wanting it fully funded. But yes, there are a couple of lines in the budget where we struggle with that we need to figure out how to fully use what's appropriated so this doesn't happen.
I think we are one of the counties that fully uses that 50,000, as I recall historically. The other one is maybe more directed towards staff or the Sheriff, and that's the secondary road patrol. I don't know how much that affects us. If it's 2 million statewide, do we have any sense for how that affects us here? And is that something we ought to be talking to our delegation about? Is it a concern about the impact on road patrol here? Looks like we'll get a little feedback on that.
Morning, everybody. So
morning.
specifically here in Kent County, we have about 2.75 FTEs that are funded by the state, or by that program. That's down from a high watermark of about 13 years and years and years ago, and it's a historically dwindling fund that's split between Secondary Road Patrol and also MCOLS, which is the oversight body for commissions for law enforcement, and they're taking a larger and larger portion of that for their administrative overhead. So yes, it is something that affects us. That group does traffic accident investigation, so if there's a chargeable traffic accident, they're gonna be the one that does it countywide, and they also do targeted patrol for traffic violations in high danger intersections, things like that. So it's a program that we do need to take another look at statewide. It's even more critical in some of the other locations in the state because they don't have the other resources. But I don't really expect a tremendous change in that this year, just like we haven't had it for the last several years. We did get a supplement last year, though, that did help
To fund that.
with about a 50% FTE for us. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Well, I guess the lesson perhaps is, or the question is whether we're going to have to fund that out of general fund. If those accident investigations are something that needs to happen, if it's not getting funded this way, it's going to have to get funded some other way, and it's going to affect our budget. So something to be aware of, I guess. Thank you.
Commissioner Melton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm piggybacking, Becky, on what Commissioner Ponstein had to say about the lack of covering the topic of mental health. You're right, to wait, not to wait, but to be short-sighted enough that we don't get riled up until it is a crisis, which quite frankly, it really already is if you are at all part of the medical community or the law enforcement community, the legal community, and all those that have the fallout from this. With what you see in Lansing, is there anything in particular or in general that we as commissioners, county commissioners, could do or say besides writing? I mean, and I'm very good at that, but I think they see my name now and just sort of do like this. But to have them truly appreciate that this is a huge concern, and all we need to do, and I keep saying this, but is to look to the West Coast, and they're now putting billions of dollars in California into their budget because they were so short-sighted.
Well, I think certainly engaging our legislators, and I know that's one thing that the staff at Kent County has fully engaged our West Michigan delegation to understand the implications of funding for mental health services and having other counties do the same as well. I know Oakland County is very engaged in this issue as well as Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority. I mean, everyone is talking. It's getting to the legislature to actually engage. If the governor's office does want to move forward with that mental health proposal that's coming out of the Department of Health and Human Services, it will need legislative approval, and that's probably another venue in which we'll have an opportunity to have some conversations and offer some advice and consent and some of our ideas as well during that process. But I think if they move forward, that's a great opportunity for us to have a voice in that conversation.
Okay, thanks, Becky.
Anyone else? If not, just to follow up on that, and so you now have 3 members of the Network 180 board sitting on this committee, so you'll get mental health put back at you frequently. But, so the proposals from the department are not proposals that'll solve the problem next month or even next year. Those are longer-term proposals, and the funding crisis is very imminent. There had been discussions about, even in the supplemental, a significant contribution. Is that still in the mix as far as you know?
Yes, I believe that that is. I think the timing right now is the problem and the challenge in that I think I go back to the Speaker of the House because that's a priority for him. I don't hear that as a priority for the Senate Majority Leader. I know the governor's office is a little skeptical because of the other pressures on the budget. But yes, it's been my understanding that that is a topic of conversation of having some additional supplemental money included.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, excuse me, Administrator's Office Report on the Purchase Development Rights Selection Criteria for 2020.
Yes, this is a request to the Board of Commissioners to approve the 2020 Kent County Purchase of Development Rights Selection Criteria. The Purchase of Development Rights Ordinance was adopted by the Board of Commissioners in 2002, which established procedures for the administration of the PDR program. By ordinance, the Kent County Agricultural Preservation Board is responsible for much of the program administration, with certain items presented to the Board of Commissioners for approval. The Agricultural Preservation Board has prepared the selection criteria to be used to rank and prioritize PDR applications. Per the ordinance, the Board of Commissioners must annually approve the criteria. This year's selection criteria focuses on preservation efforts in areas with large blocks of agricultural land and considers factors such as soil type, parcel size, proximity to water and sewer, and proximity to other public or private preserved land. The 2020 scoring criteria are the same used in 2019. The Agricultural Preservation Board intends to seek funding to preserve qualifying applications to the Michigan Agricultural Preservation Fund and the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. All applications need to proceed through the county process to be eligible for submittal to the MAPF and ACEP.
Is there a motion to approve? It is moved and supported to approve. Any discussion? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
You've all heard my story on this one, so I'll give you back 2 minutes, but I'll be voting no.
Okay. Thank you. I just do have a question. I wasn't quite sure yet what is the distinction or what is the difference between the criteria from last year to this year. It says that the scoring criteria are going to be the same.
They're the absolute same as last year. We had a broad-based discussion about some changes, but we decided to do more research on the potential impact of those before moving forward. And it would be about where we would prioritize land close to water, sewer, and development. So,
Because this is getting a fair amount of additional review and consideration by administration and elsewhere, but this year it's going to stay the same.
it is, and we brought.
Assuming we approve this.
Assuming you approve it, yeah. And the Commissioner Coleman is on the committee, and I would say that, from my experience, it was a pretty robust discussion.
Okay. Commissioner Talon.
Just excuse me, a compliment. This has been vetted for a lot of years, and I'm always impressed at how clear we are about the criteria and how they really reflect priorities for getting the best bang for the very few dollars that we have for this work. So kudos to the Ag Board.
Commissioner Salfeld.
Thank you, Chair. I'll vote in favor of this, but I am disappointed that several years ago we did the agribusiness work group and we came up with multiple ways to address the preservation of farmland. I see nothing about that except this one program, which has frankly caused a lot of controversy and is somewhat stuck in the mud in terms of its effectiveness. And it just, I think it would behoove this county to go back and review that agribusiness task force, which was done with representatives across the county, including the city, to see other ways that we can address this issue. This is not the only way to address farmland preservation. And in fact, it's a very inefficient way to address farmland preservation. And so I would just hope that this county does look at those other opportunities that were identified in that report.
Yeah, we take that to heart, Commissioner Salfeld. Last year, we took the time to take the board through a work session in this room, and Matthew Van Zetten and now Matthew Channing are involved. Matthew's here now in the office. We pulled that resource in-house along with the other members of our analytics team to do exactly what you're talking about. We've been meeting with the Preservation Board with local townships in attempting to get to where you're at and seize the opportunity for other pathways to remedy this instead of it coming to the board, like you say, and being controversial. So we are at work at that. You will hear more about that this week, Thursday, at the retreat. But I can tell you that we're very serious about attempting to do that because we've heard it not only from you, but from others on the board. So
Thank you.
I would suggest approval of the selection criteria would no way minimize that effort, Commissioner. Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
I think the point is well taken about tying the agriculture to the business development that we have. But when you look, it's really interesting, when you look at the subregions, the areas that are highlighted, the Fruit Ridge is listed at the top. And I do think that that is a farm area that is unduplicated anywhere else and certainly does lead to strong economic gains for this county.
Anyone else? If not, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One no. Thank you, it is approved. Next item of business is the Board of Commissioners appointment process to the Gerald R. Ford International Airport Authority Board and the Community Mental Health Authority Board, Network 180.
yes, this is a request to the board to appoint Peter Buchema to the Gerald R. Ford International Airport Authority Board for an unexpired term ending December 31, 2020, and Commissioner Jim Talon to the Community Mental Health Authority Board for a 3-year term beginning April 1, 2020. A midterm vacancy occurred on the Gerald R. Ford International Airport Authority Board. Solicitation took place thereafter to fill the vacant position. An interview team consisting of Commissioner Stan Steck, Chair, Phil Skaggs, and Matt Coleman reviewed applications and interviewed candidates for the vacancy. The interview team is recommending the appointment of the candidate noted above. In addition, Commissioner Talon is recommended as for reappointment to the Community Mental Health Authority Board for a 3-year term beginning April 1, 2020 through March 31, 2023.
Let me clarify before I take a motion, and that is that I did not participate in that interview team because of my knowledge of the individuals, and Commissioner Vonk did step in and serve on that committee as its chair. So is there a motion to approve the proposal?
So moved.
Moved and supported. Any comments?
I think we've got a good candidate here for the airport and carry the torch to the next generation and got a good background in the private sector, and I think he's going to do a good job.
Thank you, Commissioner Vonk. Yes, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. I don't have a problem with either of the candidates here, but when it comes to the airport board, is there a balance that we're trying to get when we appoint individuals? I know when this position was open, it was more of a business interest outside the county. And it seems like we've got a lot of hospitality interest on that board now, where the corporate side that flies in people and use the airport for other things is seemed to be not a voice that's strong on this board anymore.
Well, my understanding is that there is an intent to try to be balanced in the appointment of these positions. This particular position is an out-county position, which was not particularly easy for us to fill and to require a fair amount of effort to reach out into our surrounding communities to find qualified candidates. I would say that I thought that we ended up with 3 very highly qualified candidates that were interviewed by this team, and frankly, any one of those 3 could have made a strong contribution. So I'm, having talked to them, I know it was a difficult decision to winnow this down to 1. But beyond that, that's a relatively few positions from which we have to cover a fairly broad perspective. I don't disagree with this committee's analysis and balancing of that and in considering all those. And I don't think they were disregarding the kinds of considerations you've raised in making its decision. But then I wasn't on it, so I'll have to defer to.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning it, I just want to question it.
Yeah.
Depends on the board.
Yes, Commissioner Skaggs.
I guess since you've solicited answers to Commissioner Ponstein's query, I think that one of the things that we were looking for in the committee was a business interest. Some of the other applicants came from the public sector, and there really are a lot of public sector people that are on that board already, or former public sector or quasi-public sector, like The Right Place and Experience Grand Rapids, and they should be on there. I think they play a meaningful role. But having someone who was from the private sector who had experience in this field, I think was a useful and important addition.
Commissioner Coleman.
Just one quick addition. Of all the applicants for this position, I think the only private sector applicants were hospitality. This particular gentleman also happens to be a pilot personally, so has got a personal interest in aviation and activity there as well, so seemed the best candidate.
Anyone else? If not, let me say, anything else that about Mr. Talon serving on the CMH board? There must be a few questions about that.
We don't have enough time.
Some worms don't want to open. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is approved. Thank you. Next item, Veteran Services.
Yes, this is a request to the Board of Commissioners to add one full-time clerk two at Kent County Veteran Services. Kent County Veteran Services is requesting the addition of one full-time clerk position to support staff and programs. The additional staff member is needed based on current growth and demand for services. The cost of the new position is $67,633 for wages and benefits. The new position is supported by the Veterans Advisory Committee and will be entirely funded by the Veteran Services millage.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve. Yes?
Approve.
Yes. Support? And supported. Discussion? Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
Given really what is a relatively small amount that's given to Veteran Services, how do they manage to come up at this point with this additional funds out of the millage money? Can you explain to me, how this all's come about?
Well, I could try, but I see that Martha is in the audience. Maybe she could come up and give us some additional detail on that. Or Steve Duarte, one of the two.
You gonna flip a coin here
I know
to
there's
see
been
who wins?
quite a bit of discussion on this over the last year, and I think they've done a really good job netting it out, so. There's a memo inside the in the package as well.
Morning, I'm Martha Burkett, the manager for Kent County Veteran Services. The millage fund has been in place for about 3 years, and every year we don't spend it. I mean, we don't come even close to spending the amount of money that's in that fund. And so this year, we're working on spending more of it. We have a few initiatives that we're working on, and the reason that we haven't spent it isn't because we don't have any needs. It's just that the office has been in flux for a couple of years, and I came in and I needed a year to kind of get things organized and straightened out. And so now we're at the point where we're starting to launch new initiatives, and we're looking at program growth and that kind of thing. And so this position basically would replace what used to be an intern position. We used to get an intern that would come and stay with us for 3 months at a time. This would be funded by the VA, but there aren't a lot of interns that are available. So the last one that we had, we actually kept for 6 months. That expired in September. We tried to replace that person through different volunteer agencies and so on and so forth, and we were unsuccessful. But my experience just in the last year with this intern is that actually ends up being really labor intensive, because then we have to train that person, and then we have to get them up to speed on all the things that we do and on HIPAA and Privacy Act and all that kind of stuff, and then they leave. So my thought was that since we have this money in the fund, then we would be able to have a full-time position. We don't have to go through that issue with turnover. This person would be a clerk too, which would mean also that I could cross-train that person to do some of the things that our Sailors and Soldiers Relief person does right now. So that way, if that person's gone, this person can cover for them. This person would be able to really assist the Veteran Services officers at kind of an elevated level above what the volunteer could do.
Yeah. Can I add just a one caveat to this? She mentioned the fact that we're not spending the millage dollars to the extent that we could or should. One of the things that the millage review committee, the Veteran Services Committee, had right from the jump was to make sure that we did not misspend the dollars that were allocated, because at some point we're going to be going back in front of the public for renewal of the millage. So they were very strident about not spending the dollars foolishly, and I think that's part of it. Before Martha came on, I remember those discussions that were had right from the beginning with Paul Potter, who's now deceased, and Fred Chambers and others. So that's part of it, too. Just want you to know that the county is very particular via the Veteran Services Committee about how we do spend those dollars. And so now Martha's here doing an outstanding job in elevating the way that we could utilize those dollars, and now we've got a committee that's aligned with you, and it's working great. So thank you.
Additionally, the administrative assistant, Rachel Woosman, who is fabulous, at present, she's been really trying to cover the gap that was left by that volunteer, by that person, the intern, not a volunteer. And so that takes her away from her primary tasks. And there are others on the team who have shared time covering, but it takes all of them away from their primary tasks. So it's caused a lot of stress, especially for Rachel, because she's just like spinning plates like crazy. And so trying to help her manage that. One of the other things is that Rachel is an extremely bright and capable young woman who's been kind of underutilized, I think, and she has a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of intelligence, and she has a real interest in helping with some of the outreach activities that would bring more collaboration of other agencies, that would help us to understand better about the resources that are out there and create relationships, and also increase the numbers of veterans that are coming to our office for services, which in turn brings more money into our office. So having this person would allow me to utilize her more fully and expand her skill set, and also toward program development, toward being able to bring in more services that will serve veterans and their families. And the committee is really excited about some of the ideas that we have and kind of some of the kind of fresh ideas that we have about how to expand veteran services and increase our footprint in the community.
Commissioner Tallon?
Thank you, Chair. I have a vague memory that perhaps the Veterans Millage, the Veterans Services Committee has had a reluctance to fund staff in the past. Is that the case? And is this the first time that we've used Veterans Millage dollars to fund a staff position?
Yeah, that was right. You're right, Jim. We did we were keeping track of the number of hours staff were spending and the number of calls that were being made right from the beginning. I remember that. So yes, there's always been a very strong concern from the Veteran Service Committee that we don't plug these dollars for staff, but we push them to services. But what I think Martha's bringing out, which the Concur Committee is speaking of, is that in order to move the services out, you've got to have qualified staff to do it. And I think they've got an alignment with that idea now.
I just wanted to note that this is kind of a change in how we use these dollars. We haven't done this before. It's not like a whole bunch of people in the Veterans Department are paid for out of millage dollars. This is the first time we're doing that. So I'm not opposed to it, but just wanted to note that.
Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. I guess if there is money in this budget, does any of that money go to the Veterans Treatment Court?
Yes, it does.
And how is the budget for that court currently?
I don't know the number. What's the number of dollars?
We're giving them $130,000 this year.
About $130,000, yeah.
Okay, and that's out of a total budget, do you know?
I'm sorry.
What's the total budget for that court?
I know they provided us with that information, and I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to get it for you.
Okay, if we could get
It's a
that.
large sum of that budget is spent, is coming out of this budget, I can tell you that. I believe a large percentage is coming out of Veteran Services to fund it.
Okay.
So you're going to get that
Yes.
back to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
To all
Okay.
of them, yeah.
So I have a follow-up question, indicating that we underspend our dedicated millage for the veterans. How much do we underspend, and is that accumulating, because it's dedicated, so it must accumulate from year to year?
The question is, how much is left in fund balance each year?
Is that what it is?
the number?
For the fund, I'm going to give it a range, it's probably about 500,000 to 700,000 right now.
And that's accumulating from year to year? It's growing then every year if we're underspending?
Is that correct?
The question,
He said, is it growing every year because we're underfunded?
I haven't looked at the history, see if it's growing, but I'm going to guess it's been in that range because we keep trying to adjust the current year's expenditures so that it doesn't continue to grow.
Marvin,
I can give you a 5-year history or whatever we've got.
Marvin's behind you. Marvin Van Ark is behind you.
My question is, the fund balance as of the end of 2018 was a little over $800,000, and they had a positive margin in 18 of a little over $200,000.
So does that add up to $1 million? No.
Approximately 600.
Oh, I see.
It was the beginning
The other
fund
way
balance
direction.
with an additional 200, got them a little over $800,000.
Matthew Van Zetten, you have something to contribute to that?
To Commissioner Skaggs' question about Veterans Treatment Court, it's roughly about a $200,000 budget. This year, Scale cut their funding, so we increased ours, and we provide the vast majority of that funds that allow. Ours Veteran Treatment Court is the most staffed treatment court in the state of Michigan, and has the most partnerships, has the friends, the mentors. It's by far the most robust in the state. In terms of this fund balance, because I've been involved for some time, Wayman's right. The committee was very hesitant to staffing up front. They didn't want to staff. And then we had significant turnover of VSOs. So we lapsed significant money, and Martha's now been there and putting plans in place with the committee. And we're much more proactive now. So I think those things are all being resolved to that lapsing of funds and things like that. There's also been a hesitancy when I was interim director there from that advisory committee to really spend money. They really were cautious about not wanting to spend. So it's taken some time to work with them, and I think Martha's done that heavy lifting so that they now are all aligned on how the program should be operating. So we're moving forward effectively.
So you used the term lapsing. That suggests to me that the money is lost and goes
No,
somewhere else.
it stays in the.
Accumulates.
Like we've talked about.
Yeah. Commissioner Skaggs.
Thanks, Matthew, if you want to just stay put there, if you could. So you talk about the robust Veterans Treatment Court. Are we serving everyone that we could? Is anyone being turned away that's eligible?
No, that's a question that the prosecutor gets a list when arrests are made and other things like that. The jail works with the prosecutor to have a look at who's a veteran and who's come in and who would be a good candidate for the Veterans Treatment Court, and they have a partnership across the county with co-occurring jurisdiction, so anybody can work with Judge Cortez and the Veterans Treatment Court and Prosecutor Becker. So I believe we're at full capacity in the caseload that they're looking at, but we can confirm that. But to my knowledge, there's a judicial discretion involved and a prosecutorial discretion involved as well that takes into account.
So yeah, that would be great to hear back from, because if we do have these funds and we do have veterans that we could be helping here, I think that would be something that we'd want to look strongly at improving.
Commissioner Hennessy.
Perhaps this would be a good point to use some of our performance reviews and sort of get an idea of what is going on within our Veterans Services Department and how it is serving people, and what some of the possibilities and opportunities that you're looking at and improving the service delivery and working with your advisory committee.
All right, anyone else? If not, remember the motion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, it is approved. Move on to item number 8, miscellaneous. Yes, Commissioner Mock.
I'll circle around just to what Carol said and what many of the board members have said this morning. We talked about PDR, we talked about veterans issues, separate from what the appointment was. And airport issues, we got a big recycling issue that'll be coming up probably next year, be a big issue. I don't think we're doing the oversight on this committee like we used to do. I'm not one to make more meetings, I said this before, but it's sort of, I don't need my hands on the steering wheel, but it's nice to look at the speedometer. And I don't think we're looking at the speedometer anymore on this committee, and I think we need to take that action, and so we can do a deeper dive, whether it be veterans issues or PDR, or share our ideas and whatnot and direction. Now, I know it's easier for staff to have us out of the mix, but I think sometimes we need to be in the commission, or in the kitchen, so that's my thoughts for today. And I never have an opinion on it.
No, we don't. Chef Bonk. Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
Commissioner Steck, you participated as we start to take a deeper dive in things. The Area Agency on Aging, particularly its Senior Millage Committee, is looking at with 20 years under our belt, we're looking at how we deliver the services and strategically whether we have the best plan as we continue to move forward. And both of us participated in the session last week, as did Matthew. And, it's a good process, and it is another way in which we are beginning to take these deeper dives and look at what is going on and how we're spending the money. And this particular session will be repeated, it'll never be the same, but it'll be held again tomorrow with another cast of characters. But it's staff, it's service providers, and senior millage committee members who are participating in this, and it's led by a consultant group out of the Lansing area. So it's a very good process, and it is allowing this little bit of a performance review, a deeper dive, a close review of what's going on.
And I can underscore that it's a valuable conversation. I mean, it's far-ranging, and it covers the scope of what we need to be looking at. So, yes, good. Someone else? Yes, Commissioner Ponstein. Did I get overruled here? Commissioner Ponstein has yielded his 3 minutes to Commissioner Melton.
You're giving up your 3 minutes now?
Just two very quick things. One is with sadness, but I just felt the need to share. I think oftentimes our unsung heroes in our public schools in particular are our security departments. And we had the privilege of having one in Kentwood who not only knew all the kids, but he knew their stories. He just was very approachable, and he left our school to go on to a private company, and I just learned that he died of a heart attack a few weeks ago, and I just I guess I just wanted to share that certainly we never know when those things will happen, but just to remember that our kids are only as safe as our security department is willing to dive into that, and he always did. And the second one is I am on the KCCA committee, and this Saturday, Leap Day, wait a minute, here we go, is their Walk for Warmth. I did not realize that since they became part of, or under the cover of the county, they can no longer do fundraising. So what they can do, though, is take donations. And this year, for the first time, the Consumers Energy is not going to match their funds, so they are even that further behind. And there's been a 14 to 17% increase in fuel costs over the last year, meaning an average increase of $106 to $253 per household. So I will be walking. It was actually suggested by the two city commissioners who were there that perhaps all 19 of us commissioners would walk Saturday morning. I said I would do my best. I'll mention it again on Thursday, but I am going to be walking. I would encourage anyone who feels that when they turn their thermostat up, that it's would be really nice to have someone who's not capable of paying for themselves to have that opportunity to turn their thermostat up too. So if you want to donate to my cause, that's fine. And if you would like to walk, it's at the 121 Fuller, Franklin Street rather, and starts at 8 o'clock this Saturday. Thanks.
Did all 6 of the city commissioners indicate they
Well,
would?
you know, I didn't ask that.
Just wondering. Yes, Commissioner Ponstein, now it is, you can
Oh,
have
sure,
your 3
sure.
minutes back.
Thank you, Chair Steck. So I wanted to echo Commissioner Vonk's comment. I'm all for more meetings, and I've sat on this committee 11 of my 12 years, and we always hear that the Finance Committee does the heavy lifting. And I think there's a lot of things that were even spoken on today's agenda that need to have a deeper look into it. And one of those that I would hope maybe not a performance review, but just a review of the Veterans Office. If we're going to be going back to the electorate to ask for a renewal of that, we're going to need the answers to those questions. Because I know I was one that was critical of the budget for the veterans after this. And I think the perception out there is when this millage was passed, it was to help veterans. It wasn't to staff people. And I appreciate that in order to get veterans the help they need, we need staff to go through the bureaucratic forms that need to be done. But, you know, I would hope we can get a better idea of how things are spent, what's the impact of these people that we do hire, and are there any unmet needs that veterans have in this community that we should or maybe should be working on but don't? Because if anyone watches TV at night, it seems like every newscast has a story about a veteran that's in trouble. Either he's lost the home, mental health issue, and it goes on and on. There's public service announcement and groups that are constantly hammering this home, and what we've got to do is come to some type of agreement of what the goal of that millage is and whether or not it's going to be worthy for renewal, which I think it is. But I just think as a committee, we need to dive deeper into some of these issues instead of just this, you know, these short, quick agendas. So having said that, just one last thing. I didn't know whether to bring it up during public affairs or not, but Becky had mentioned that the jail reimbursement is going to be at a flat rate. So I guess Lansing is telling us, look, we did you a favor. We didn't cut that. But my question is, are we fully getting reimbursed when we take prisoners from the state for all our costs, or is it still a cost for us?
Is the sheriff pondering?
Did you hear that?
Did you hear the question? No. Okay. The question was whether or not when we take a inmate from the state, are we fully compensated under the current system for the cost of that, or are we contributors?
We are contributors.
Okay, so, and that's the point that I think we've got to drive home to our legislators. Yeah, they did a favor by not cutting that, or even, you know, the budget that came through, and it's still at a flat rate, but a flat rate is still costing taxpayers money so we can house state prisoners, I think, with far, well, at least with Kent County, far more benefits to that prisoner, but our costs need to be recovered fully, and that
Right.
doesn't seem to be ever talked about.
Yeah, it's been a flat rate for a substantial amount of time. Roughly speaking, when we looked at this issue last year, because the funding was in jeopardy, there was about 80 inmates that would have been kind of in this basket of services. You know, my only caution is we run around $115 a day per inmate. I'd have to look at the exact amount today, but that's a range. Not every person costs the same amount because some people need more services than other people. If they're early in their incarceration, they have more services at the beginning than they do during the middle. So, you know, a large number of these inmates are actually involved in our inmate programming. Perhaps some of them are involved in our work release or our trustee opportunities. So I can't give you an exact amount. I do think that we do provide a good service here in Kent County and that our citizens are best remaining in our community so that they can be close to family who could perhaps visit or communicate more effectively. But we are not getting cost recovery. We haven't gotten cost recovery for some time, and there is a substantial amount of cost involved in it.
And I just want to add to that, because I talked to one of your staff members about this issue, and I think the information would be good for everyone on this committee, is that what we do at Kent County is different than other jails, and the services we provide prior to getting them, having them, and then releasing them, we just don't take them in and then when their time's up, we throw them out. We try to send them out back into the community better than what we received them. And there's a cost to that. But a lot of jails in the state do not do that. So my hat's off to the staff for doing that. But once again, we've got to be advocating that if there's a positive result to what we do, which there is, then our costs, doggone it, need to be reimbursed fully. And this gravy train that the state's on has got to come to an end. So hats off to you and your staff. I really appreciate it. And anytime I've had a question or concern, you've gotten back with me. But that was one thing that has stuck with me is what our jail does different than other county jails.
And it continues to be our focus moving forward as well. Yep.
Thank you. Here. All right, anyone else? If not, just to remind folks that there are a couple more appointments that we are still working on through the interview process, and hopefully we'll have those completed and to us at the next time. Also, we'll take some of the urging from my colleagues to have a conversation about whether we, again, restructure the scheduling of these meetings. We have made some changes over the last year, so we can take a look at that and see if we can elevate some of these issues that you've raised. So, with that, we stand adjourned.
I am Kent County. I am Kent County.
I am Kent County.
We are 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 Kent County.
Beya, Kent County. Ami, Kent County.
Somos, Kent County.
Mas Ira, Kent County.
We are Kent County. We are Kent County.
We are Kent County. Oh yeah.